Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. This is episode 2 of Farmall Super C restoration. Luckily, it's raining out today. I needed an excuse to work in the shop, and the goal today is to split this tractor, get the front end off, pull the engine, and be able to take the crankshaft out of the engine. That's the real goal, so I can get the crankshaft to the machine shop. First thing we want to do is take the water pump off this because it's in the way of getting this casting off, the front end casting. When I get into a job like this, I like to finish it. So in this case, finishing it, well, come off there, is to get everything to the machine shop. I took the head and the connecting rods and the rocker arms down to David Richards this morning so that he's got everything he needs. The crank is going to a separate shop. David Richards doesn't grind cranks, so I've got to get the crank out and get it to that shop, and then I'll feel like I'm at a stopping place and I can rest a little bit on this job because I got to wait for the machine shops to do their work. There's our little water pump. I got my hoist hooked up to the front casting, and now we just got to crank on these to raise up the tractor. Our patented splitting stands take the weight off the front wheels here. And then there's just 4 bolts we got to take out. There's one here, there's one on the other side back here, a bolt with a nut on it here, and then another bolt in back there, and this whole front end will slide out. I do make an exception and use power tools sometimes. For these big bolts, I'd rather do that. No, you're gonna be tough, aren't you? I got a cure for that. You do not want to come off. There we go. And I think I'll go ahead and take the governor off and get it out of the way too. This governor is pretty much the same as the one that I tore down and rebuilt on a 504 last fall. Now we come to the part that I've been looking forward to. Not really. We have to pull this crankshaft pulley off, and it's a tapered fit. There's no nut on the end of it or anything. You got to use a puller. I'm going to put a split or a bearing splitter on here to get behind the pulley. We're going to set it right around the back of the pulley like this. Should still be a good firm grip. Don't have to worry about breaking the pulley when you got a bearing splitter on the back side of it. Now way back in the center here is a threaded hole that you use. You can use it to draw the pulley back on when you're installing it. I'm just going to use what I call a sacrificial socket there so I don't mess up the threads, and the tapered point of the puller can rest down on that and spin on it. Then I can put the puller on here. Let's see if we can get it to move with just the impact wrench. She moved. Let's see what we got here. Bearing splitter. Pulley. See, this is tapered in here to fit on the shaft. No nut in the center. Just bloop, bloop. And look at this. Somebody put a speedy sleeve on here. See that? Where the seal rides? Somebody's been in here and done some work. Saved me a little bit of work. I got a nice smooth surface for the seal. And then here's the end of the crankshaft. There's a key that goes on the shaft, and down in here is that threaded hole I was talking about for reinstalling the pulley. Oh, Craftsman sockets made to live forever. Didn't even hurt my sacrificial socket. This crankshaft pulley came off about as easily as any one I've ever done, and let me show you my secret. All you got to do is have the torch at the ready, and then the pulley knows you mean business. Next we'll pull this distributor drive and distributor off. There's just 2 bolts that hold these on. That's the little key that drives the distributor and the distributor gear. Look at it, I still got a wire hooked up here. And these are the governor weights. They fly out to control the RPMs of the engine. You know, it's all centrifugal force. It comes right out of there. Next job is to remove the fuel tank, and I want to get the sediment bowl off here so it doesn't get smashed. Take the bail off. Whoops. Oh well. There's always a little bit of fuel left in the tank because this little standpipe on top of the sediment bowl. I'll just wipe it up with a rag, and then I can store the rag with all the other greasy rags underneath the shop heater. Safest place. We got to pull off the fuel tank because this bracket mounts to the back of the block. It would help if I had the right size. And the rear fuel tank mount is on top of the touch control hydraulic block here. One on each side. And then we can take off this bracket that holds the fuel tank up that's mounted to the engine. This is a hydraulic pump here. It runs off the timing gears. We got to take care of that next. We got to detach this set of pipes that runs back to the auxiliary control valve here and the touch control hydraulic block. Actually, we're just going to remove the pipes. This end is kind of way down in there behind the auxiliary valve. Oops. That takes care of that. We are almost ready to pull this engine out. We just got to take this cover plate off here. It covers the end of the flywheel. Oh, yummy, yummy. Mice made a home. There's the flywheel. And I'm going to take the timing cover off just because it's really easy to get at here. It's at a nice height, so might as well take it off. We got about 1 million bolts here. I'm really amazed that that crank pulley had a speedy sleeve on it, and all the tractors I've torn down, that's the first speedy sleeve I've run into, and the crank I know hasn't been turned because it's still got standard bearings in it. Somebody took the time to repair a leaking front main seal here. That's very surprising. I'm certainly not a big fan of these sheet metal front timing covers because sometimes they aren't that easy to get sealed, especially this part right here where the governor attaches on. You've got a gasket that runs in here with not a lot to hold it from deflecting, and it makes it fun to seal up. She needs a little bit of persuasion. Yeah, see, they use this thick gasket in here to give it more of a chance of sealing. And this is the front seal for the crankshaft, a lip seal. Well, what have we got going on here? It's a funny wear mark there. Huh. Guess we'll have to take a look at that. Here's the end of the crankshaft. So this rotates twice for every time that the camshaft rotates. That's the relationship. And then here is the hydraulic pump drive gear, and this is where the governor drives off. There's a gear that goes right here. I'm going to have to take a look at all these because this has got a funny wear mark on it. That's about what I expect for backlash. Yeah. Now we can put the hoist on the engine and get ready to lift it. I know that someone will say, because they always do, that I should be using these to lift it. This engine is so light, and it's easier for me using this chain to fit through a 3/8 inch bolt here, that it'll be fine. The 3 years of structural engineering that I took in college tell me so. We've got 6 bolts here to attach the engine, 2 on each side, and then 2 up top here. Break them all loose. Well, that was easy. That was easy too. These are the last 2 bolts right here. Well, you get out of the way. There's still probably 2 alignment dowels in here, someplace in the joint that's holding things up. Let's see if she'll break loose. That was weird. There you go. So what we see from the back of the engine here is clutch, pressure plates down in there. Here's the flywheel. And then on the tractor end of things, we've got the clutch shaft here going in where it seats into the pilot bearing, and then we've got lots of mouse crap in the bell housing. Whoops. You can just see the clutch throwout bearing back here, and there's the starter drive right there. In order to put this on the engine stand, I got to take the clutch and the flywheel off. Now, there's 6 bolts holding this on. I did the 3 opposite ones, or 3, skipped one every time. This got spring pressure on it. So then you just loosen them up a little at a time. See the forks coming out there? That's the spring pressure releasing. And pretty soon we'll be at the end of the spring travel. I think we already are. So here's the clutch. And here is the pressure plate. Yeah, we're going to want to replace that when we're in here. Get the flywheel turned too. Then we can take the flywheel off. There's just some locking tabs that need to be bent back here. I'm going to want to lower this down before I take the flywheel off because it's pretty heavy. You know what? This is a good job for the impact wrench. Alright. One flywheel. Yeah, see how that's cracked in there? I want to get that turned. Then what we have here is the other end of the crankshaft, the rear end, and then the rear main seal, which is a 2-piece deal with felt in it, if I remember right, to make the seal. Let's clean this up a little bit. Lots of mouse duty on here. And I want to pull this rear main seal off because it needs to come off to get the crankshaft out, and I want to get it off before I put it on the engine stand because it's hard to get at once the engine's on the stand. Alright, we'll apply a little persuasion here. Yeah. There's one side, yeah, felt seal in there. And there's the other side. Now we can get this engine mated up to the engine stand. Oh, gonna need some washers there. Actually, we should put that the other way around so it can spin without hitting this upright here. That's just goofy, all those washers. What the heck is he thinking? Let's let it down. We can turn her over, see what runs out. What do we see here? Well, there's the crankshaft. There's 3 main bearings, and the rearmost bearing is the thrust bearing. You can see the flange coming up, and the thrust bearing is what limits movement of the crankshaft back and forth this way. And usually one bearing does that job. In this case, it's the rear one. All we got to do is pop these 2 covers off, and then we can pull the crankshaft off. There's the camshaft way down there, and the lifters are underneath that. There's one. There's 2 still connected to the rear main seal gasket. Just got to flatten off these lock plates, and then we can take the bearings out and the crankshaft off. Pop these bearing caps off. Always look to see how they're identified. Where's the mark? What am I missing here? Oh, there's the mark. You can barely see it. That's number 1. Of course, the mark always goes to the camshaft side, so that's 1 bearing. Always count from the front. Number 1. Middle bearing, number 2. And the rear thrust bearing, mark number 3. Yeah, look at that. Uneven wear. Now we can pull the crankshaft. There we go. Here's the crankshaft. You can see that's where the oil groove is on the bearing that fits around this. And it's got quite a bit of scoring on it. There's the 3rd main bearing. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rod journals here. Pistons connect to the rod journals, or connecting rods do. And then this is the thrust bearing here. These are the flanges that the thrust bearing sides ride against. And then the main rear main oil seal goes right in here. And the front main seal, of course, rides on the pulley that goes around the shaft. And with crankshafts, I was always taught to store them upright. Believe it or not, folks say that they'll sag one way or the other if you store them on their side. So you stand them up or you hang them. Vertical. We can pull out the camshaft and have a look at it. I gotta figure out, there's the 1 retainer screw bolt. There's another one. Everything's 9/16 on this engine, except when it's 5/8. Oh. Here's the camshaft. These are the 3 bearing journals that the bearings ride on in the block. And thrust is taken back and forth movement by this plate here. And these are always fine. I've never run into one with a problem. And then the cams here, you know, you look at the points and make sure you don't see anything that shouldn't be there. And they're all fine. I've never run into one that had a problem yet. This is the gear that drives the oil pump. And of course this gear up front is driven by the crankshaft gear. And I guess the last moving part that we haven't messed with is the tappets or lifters that ride on the camshafts. These flat faces ride on the camshaft lobes up and down to push the push rod, rock the rocker arm, and valve the valve. These have always been fine. There's no galling or anything or wear, you know, it's flat. Never had a problem with any of these. I always keep these. I will take these out for cleaning, but I always number these because I want them to go in the same bore that they were in, because they rode in and wore into the bore that they ride up and down in here. Oh, and the other thing to note here is the camshafts on these engines don't have replaceable bearings. They just ride directly in the bore. It's a good thing that these camshafts rarely have any wear on them to speak of. And that's it. Like I keep saying, these little engines, they are really nice to work on. Very easy. That pulley though on the crankshaft, that could have given me a go, but it didn't at all. All in all, it took me about 3 hours to do what I did in this video. If the crankshaft pulley had given me problems, it might have taken me 5 hours. Who knows? Although with the torch, that's mighty convincing to something like a pulley that is stubborn. What's next? Well, I'm going to take the crankshaft to the shop that grinds cranks tomorrow morning and get that in line. So we've got our machine work all set in line at the machine shops plenty early for this winter, which makes me feel better. I got to clean up this block. Well, I got to pull the sleeves out, and I'll probably put that in a video and show you what the cooling jacket looks inside and what the sleeves look like. Aside from the engine though, I can start stripping down this frame back here. The touch control block housing rock shafts, that comes all out as one unit. The battery, the tree, the steering wheel, the seat. Strip all this down and I can start getting ready for cleaning that up. And I got to do some work on the brakes. We got to look inside the bell housing. So that's the way it goes. Now that I got this done though, I don't know when I'm going to be back on this, because we've gotten what I wanted to get done. I'll be back to farm work outside. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been a fun project. So far, no major rocks in the road. I'll see you next time.